flowers, but I suspect that you'll see a little bit of it around. So what's the most important thing to do at this time of year other than water? I think it's to fertilize. And there's a big difference in chemical fertilizers versus organic fertilizers. And organic fertilizers can come in a number of forms. I know there's still people out there that think, oh, if it's organic, it's cow poop. No, there are fertilizers, organic fertilizers that have zero manures in them. There are organic fertilizers that are poultry litter based. There are organic fertilizers that I don't like, but some people like, but there are what we call biosolids fertilizers out there. Biosolids, that's a polite word for sewage sludge. Nobody buy them. We call them sewage sludge fertilizers. But some people still use them. They use them on some golf courses and places, but it's just a matter of personal taste. I don't really care for them. I don't mind the manure-based fertilizers. The fertilizer that we use and recommend most highly is a poultry litter product, but you're not going to find Q-actinide or milorganite or things like that around here. I just don't care for the biosolids. But what makes organic fertilizers better than chemical fertilizers? There are a bunch of things that do. Chemical fertilizers can burn because they cause just an immediate rush for the plants to take up water. If you're using chemical fertilizers, you better water immediately afterwards. If you put a chemical fertilizer on a wet leaf, it sticks to the leaf, it will burn anywhere it touches. Perhaps the worst thing about chemical fertilizers, or two of the worst things about chemical fertilizers, one is that there is nothing to bind them to the soil. And granted, a chemical fertilizer probably has more nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium per se than an organic fertilizer does, but in most cases you'd be lucky if your plant's got 20% of it. You know where the other 80% goes? Down into the creeks, the rivers, into the Gulf, into the water, into our water supply, into our groundwater. Where the Mississippi River empties into the Gulf of Mexico, there's something called the dead zone. And it's an area where there are no fish, no mollusks, no clams, no oysters. There's literally no life out there. How big is the dead zone? It's as big as 2 or 3 New England states put together. And we're now finding dead zones where virtually every major river empties into the ocean. And what causes these dead zones is chemical fertilizers washing down the river. These floods that we've had on the Mississippi the past 5 years have dumped a tremendous amount of chemical fertilizer into the Gulf. Now, it's not that the fertilizer is poisonous, but what happens is the nature of the fertilizer creates a tremendous algae bloom, and then as soon as the algae runs out of that immediate nutrient supply, it all dies. When it dies, it starts to rot. When it starts to rot, it takes all the oxygen out of the water. And when you take all the oxygen out of the water, everything in the water dies, except little things we call anaerobic bacteria. And those are the bad guys. Those are your botulisms, your E. coli, your a lot of really nasty things. Not that that's in ocean water, but anaerobic conditions are not good, and that's what's creating the dead zones in the ocean, which is strictly the result of chemical fertilizers washing down the rivers. I consider chemical fertilizers to be much more of a threat than I do pesticides. Everybody's worried about poisons. No, fertilizers doing a lot more damage than the poisons are. Now, the difference in organic fertilizers, number one, they don't burn. They don't create any rush for the plants to take up water. They don't release all at once, and they stay where we put them. And why does that occur? This may be boring to some of y'all, but I'll go over it anyway, because at least one of y'all will find this interesting. And that is, there are types, so to speak, of charged particles out there. We have what are called anions, what are called cations, and the anions have a positive charge, the cations have a negative charge. Now, why is that important? Because our soils are full of clays, which for the most part have a negative charge. And everybody remembers from basic biology, chemistry, physics, whatever, that when you have like charges, they repel, right? Ever try to take two magnets and put them together the wrong way? They push each other apart, turn them around the wrong way, or the other way, so you've got negative to positive, and they lock together. Negative and positive will be attracted, and they'll be very strongly joined, whereas if you put positive, positive, or negative, negative, they push each other away. Okay, we've got soils that are full of negatively charged particles. chemical fertilizers, virtually all of the material in the fertilizer is in what we call the anionic form. It has a negative charge to it. It may be nitrates, it may be nitrites, it may be phosphates, but all of these things have a negative charge. So we put the fertilizer with the negative charges on top of soil full of negative charges. What happens? It literally pushes it away, and anything that is not used immediately by the plant washes away and is wasted, and worse than that, it pollutes. Organic fertilizers, virtually all of the nutrient material in there carries a positive charge. They're basically ammoniacal products, things related to ammonia and all. So when we put an ammoniacal, when we put what's called a cation down, what does it do? It binds to those negative charges in the soil, and it sits there until the plant's ready for it. Now plants, even though we're not going to give them conscious thought, let's just say they're highly evolved, they have developed very effective mechanisms for survival, and the plant has a way that it releases in effect a stronger positive charge through its root system, breaks free the fertilizer particle, and makes use of it in its growth. I had a big disagreement back in the days when we were arguing about the PGA Village, and you know, one of the engineers was out there was saying, oh, we can't use organic fertilizers, they pollute too much. Organic fertilizers don't create a fraction of the pollution the chemical fertilizers do, and hopefully now you understand a little bit better the reason why. If you listen to the Extension Service and these, I call them educated idiots, but if you listen to these people that have a lot of book knowledge and very little practical experience, they will tell you, oh yeah, we use chemical fertilizers and you put them down after the third full moon, after the past, you know, whatever, I know. They usually say wait 3 mowings or something like that. And they have to say this because there is such a narrow window of time that your plants are really going to be ready to effectively take up chemical fertilizers, that you have to be very, very careful when you put it on. When do you put organic fertilizer on? I usually try to do it in January because I know I'm going to be too busy in March or April or whenever Calvin and company say that it's time to put fertilizer out. There's never a bad time to put organic fertilizer out. It will not burn, it will not wash away, it will be there when your plants need it. So you do it when it's convenient for you, and you don't worry about rushing out the water or anything else because it's going to stay there till the plants need it and it's not going to burn anything in the process. Another problem with chemical fertilizers, all of these nutrients have to be acted upon by soil microbes, principally bacteria, that convert them into forms that plants can absorb them and use them. Bacteria, tiny as they are living things, and they have to have an energy source. Virtually all of the energy in the world is tied up in the form of what we call carbon bonds, which are very high energy bonds. Anybody here that took organic chemistry knows what I'm talking about. It's a complex subject, but carbon bonds store all the energy in the world. When you light a match to a piece of wood, you're breaking carbon bonds, you're releasing energy. When you start your car, you're breaking carbon bonds and those long chain carbon molecules that make up gasoline, you're releasing energy. When you turn on your gas stove, you're breaking carbon bonds, you're releasing the carbon that binds together the carbon atoms in methane and ethane and propane or whatever kind of gas you're using. So that is where the soil microbes get their energy to do the things that they need to do in the soil. When you put down chemical fertilizers go absolutely. I'm going to bring Hannah out here and let it play, but no, they get too quiet. But chemical fertilizers have no carbon in them, they have no energy in them. But the soil microbes still need that energy source to do what they need to do, so where do they get their energy? They break down the organic compounds that are present in our soil. Now the organic compounds in the soil are things that keep the soil loose and open, the things that make the soil soft, the things that make the soil absorb water. Those are all that's our organic material in the soil. And the more we put chemical fertilizers down, the more that organic material is broken down as an energy source for those soil microbes. Back in the mid-1900s, actually pre-1940, soils in the Rio Grande Valley, for instance, had an organic content somewhere around 4.5%, 5.5%, 6.5% organic content in the soil. grew the best crops in the country, grew the healthiest, most nutritious crops in the country. When it rained, the soil soaked up the moisture, and the soil never had a crust on it. So through better living, through chemistry, we start dumping all this chemical fertilizer on the ground. Today, those same soils have less than